Welcome back. In this video, we're going to examine the mark of the beast using a text-based approach. And that means we'll begin with what Revelation actually says before trying to identify any modern technology, government, political movement, or economic system. There are four main questions that I'm going to answer in this video, so stay with me to the end. Number one, what is the mark of the beast? Number two, how is the mark of the beast used? Number three, who receives the mark of the beast? And number four, when is the mark applied? We'll also consider several possible ways such a system could operate, but those possibilities will remain clearly identified as speculation. The biblical text defines the function of the mark far more clearly than it defines the technology behind it. As always, a link to the full article is included in the description below, and that version contains the complete citations, all my research, the historical background that I use, and any research notes behind the presentation. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I humbly ask that you do so. It helps me a ton by letting YouTube know that people want to watch this type of content, and it makes you part of spreading the word of God. Now let's jump right in. For decades, people have asked whether the mark of the beast might be a barcode, a credit card, an implanted microchip, a biometric identification system, or some new form of digital currency. But those possibilities begin with the wrong question. The first question should not be, what technology will the Antichrist use? The first question should be, what does Revelation require the mark to accomplish? Imagine a world where you're told that you may believe whatever you want in private, but you can't buy food, receive a paycheck, pay rent, purchase medicine, or legally participate in the economy unless you publicly demonstrate allegiance to the beast. In that world, worship is no longer treated as a private religious decision. Worship becomes the price of ordinary life. And that's the world Revelation 13 describes. The mark of the beast does not suddenly appear in Revelation as an isolated invention. It is the final stage of a carefully constructed coercion system. Revelation 13 describes a sequence. First, the second beast, later identified as the false prophet, performs extraordinary signs. Those signs create credibility. That credibility enables deception. The deception directs the people of Earth towards the beast. An image of the beast is then constructed. The image becomes the center of a compulsory worship test, and those who refuse to worship the image face death. Then, after the worship system has been established, the mark of the beast is imposed and connected to buying and selling. The progression is this. There are signs and deception. Then comes the image of the beast, forcing worship. Then the mark of the beast, which includes economic exclusion. And this sequence is so important. The mark of the beast is not just a tool that happens to be used by an evil government. It's the administrative endpoint of a worship campaign. You see, the false prophet, he uses signs to make the beast appear credible. He uses deception to redirect allegiance. And he uses the image to make worship public. And he uses the mark to make that worship economically enforceable. The mark turns the beast's religious claims into a functioning social order. That then begs the question, what exactly is the mark? The Greek word translated mark is charagma. The word can refer to something engraved, impressed, stamped, inscribed, or otherwise visibly produced. It carries the sense of a made mark, something placed upon an object or a person as an identifiable sign. Revelation places this mark on the right hand or forehead. It also connects the mark to the beast's name or to the number of his name. Most importantly, Revelation says that no one may buy or sell without the mark. That economic function places an important limitation on how we interpret it. The mark cannot be only a visible attitude within the mind. It cannot be merely a private spiritual disposition known only to God. It must be recognizable in an administratable way, because merchants, officials, employers, financial systems, or other participants in the economy must be able to determine who has authorization and who does not. Revelation does not tell us precisely how that verification occurs. It could involve a visible physical mark. It could involve a credential connected to body language of the hand and forehead. It could involve a physical mark combined with some other verification system. But whatever form it takes, the mark must be externally verifiable. And that leads us to a functional definition. We should be able to say with confidence that the mark of the beast is an externally verifiable authorization of allegiance tied to the beast's identity. It's recognized as evidence of worship compliance and used to control participation within the beast's economic order. That definition is more reliable than saying that the mark must be a chip, a tattoo, a barcode, some application or biometric scan, any identification number, or digital currency. Any of those things might theoretically become part of an enforcement system, but none of them by itself is the mark of the beast. The defining issue is not the technology. The defining issue is the allegiance. And that moves us directly into the next part. The mark of the beast cannot be separate from worship. Revelation repeatedly joins the mark to worship. Revelation 14 warns about anyone who worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on its forehead or its hand. Revelation 16 describes judgment falling on those who had the mark of the beast and worshipped its image. Revelation 20 remembers those who refused to worship the beast or its image and refused to receive the mark. The same elements remain joined throughout Revelation: worship, image, mark, and judgment. This means the mark is not religiously neutral technology that people later discovered was secretly evil. A barcode or a microchip is not the mark just because it contains numbers, not just because it can be implanted in the hand. A digital verification or identification system is not the mark just because it can verify a person's identity. A cashless payment system is not the mark just because it controls financial transactions. For any system to approach the specific pattern described in Revelation, it would have to become part of an explicit allegiance structure centered upon the beast and his image. Any of those tools could be part of the mark of the beast eventually, but they are not that now. The mark is received as the public evidence that a person has complied with that worship system. This also means Revelation does not portray someone accidentally receiving the mark, because they unwillingly or unknowingly use the wrong technology. You cannot obtain the mark of the beast by accident. The people judged for receiving the mark are consistently identified as people who worship the beast and his image. Deception is involved, pressure is involved, fear is involved, economic necessity is involved, but the mark still represents compliance. Some people might receive it enthusiastically, others reluctantly. Some may convince themselves that the worship ceremony is just symbolic or political. Some people will say, I don't really believe this in my heart, I'm only doing what's necessary to feed my family. But Revelation doesn't separate the outward act from the allegiance it represents. The system itself may encourage people to believe that public worship is only a formality. Scripture treats that supposed formality as a surrender. Why then the hand and forehead? Why does Revelation place the mark on the right hand or the forehead? These locations are not random. They draw upon earlier biblical covenant imagery. In Deuteronomy 6, Israel is commanded to keep the words of God upon the heart and to bind them as a sign on the hand and the frontlets between the eyes. The hand and forehead represent embodied covenant loyalty. God's commandments shape what the covenant people think and what they do and how they live. Revelation also describes the servants of God as being sealed on their foreheads. The Revelation therefore presents two competing systems of identification. God seals his servants, and the beast marks his followers. God's seal represents divine ownership and belonging. The beast's mark represents coerced enrollment into a counterfeit order. The mark can therefore be understood as a rival covenant sign, an anti-declaration of faith. Instead of publicly affirming allegiance to the true God, the marked person becomes publicly identified with the beast. The hand and forehead may carry symbolic meaning related to the action, identity, thoughts, and public loyalty, but Revelation's economic language prevents us from reducing those locations to symbolism alone. Whatever the hand and forehead signify, the mark must still be enforceable within ordinary economic activity. How then is the mark of the beast used? Revelation says that no one can buy or sell without the mark. Buying and selling are ordinary commercial activities. The text is not just describing the loss of luxury goods. It describes exclusion from economic life. Buying includes obtaining food, clothing, fuel for your vehicle, medicine, shelter, transportation, and other necessities. Selling includes operating your business, receiving income, offering services, trading goods, and maintaining your livelihood. In a modern economy, economic exclusion could also affect receiving your wages, paying your rent, keeping your bank account, or accessing insurance. Even purchasing medical care. using transportation systems, or conducting online transactions. It is not something that you can hide from. The exact infrastructure may differ depending on the society in which the system appears, but the effect remains the same. Ordinary life becomes conditional upon allegiance, and this is why economic pressure is such an effective form of coercion. Revelation 13 already includes the threat of exclusion for refusing to worship the image, death, but constant executions are costly and destabilizing. Economic exclusion is quieter and quicker. It places pressure upon people every day. A person, they might resist a worship ceremony once. It becomes much more difficult to resist when the consequences appear every time that person needs food, medicine, housing, employment, or care for a child. It makes it extremely hard when your child has no food. What will you do? Will you maintain your faith for God and trust that He will help you, that He will be there for you? Or will you succumb and surrender to the beast system? Because this system does not have to arrest everybody immediately. It can just make dissent economically impossible. The mark therefore functions as a scalable enforcement interface of the worship system. The image creates the test. The mark records and certifies the result. The economy enforces the decision. Revelation describes the mark as applying to all classes of society, the small and great, the rich and poor, the free and the enslaved. This does not necessarily mean that one central government employee personally verifies every transaction on Earth. A system can maintain a uniform rule while allowing enforcement to occur locally. Merchants can verify compliance. Employers can verify compliance. Landlords can verify compliance. Banks and payment systems can verify compliance. Government offices can verify compliance. Ordinary citizens may report suspected dissenters. Local authorities may enforce a rule established by a larger imperial system. This creates a distributed enforcement system. The beast system doesn't need an appointed official standing beside every cash register. It only needs to make merchants responsible for ensuring that unauthorized people can't participate. The shop owner becomes an enforcement agent. The employer becomes an enforcement agent. The landlord does too. The payment processor you use for your credit card, they become an enforcement agent. Even people who are not ideologically enthusiastic about the system will probably comply because their own survival depends on enforcing the system against others. They may tell themselves that they're only doing their jobs, that they believe the system is unpleasant, but it's necessary. They may decide that enforced unity is better than economic collapse, violence, war, or social disorder. That's how coercive systems become durable. They turn ordinary people into administrative participants. Let me give you an illustration. And again, this is speculation. But imagine a small neighborhood store. The shop owner, they're not enthusiastic about supporting the beast system. She doesn't attend political rallies or celebrate the new worship system. But her supplier account remains active only if she verifies every customer. If she sells food to an unauthorized person, her account gets frozen. Without the account, she doesn't get deliveries. Without deliveries, she loses her store. And without the store, she can't feed her family. She's reluctant. A reluctant customer also enters. He participated in the required worship ceremony, but only because he's afraid. His authorization remains active, so the transaction is approved. Another customer enters proudly displaying the mark of the beast. He firmly believes that the beast has restored order and saved society from collapse, and for him, the ceremonies create a sense of belonging and unity and purpose. But then a Christian approaches the store. He refused the worship requirement. He has no authorization. The shop owner feels sympathy for him, but sympathy doesn't change the system. If she serves him, she'll lose everything. The Christian is turned away. That is how worship becomes the price of bread. The mark makes allegiance public, and the economic system makes allegiance enforceable. So, who receives the mark? Revelation says the system pressures every social class, but it does not say that every person receives the mark. The mark separates humanity into identifiable groups. One group, they worship the beast and receive the mark. The other refuses the image, they refuse the mark. Those who receive it, they have different motives. Some may genuinely worship the beast. They may believe his signs, admire the power, and celebrate his rule. Some see him as the leader who restored peace after chaos. Some may believe the image represents unity, security, progress, or human survival. Others may comply primarily because they're afraid. They may fear losing employment. They may fear homelessness, or being unable to feed their children, or maybe even being imprisoned or put to death. But Revelation does not create a morally neutral category for reluctant worship compliance. The pressure explains why people surrender. It does not transform surrender into faithfulness. This is why the warnings in Revelation are so severe. The saints are called to endurance precisely because the pressure is going to be real. Refusing the mark is not presented as a simple verbal decision. It may mean losing economic participation, being isolated from society, may mean being dependent upon other believers. It may mean hunger, displacement, betrayal, and it may mean death. Revelation honors those who refuse to follow the beast, because their refusal demonstrates that their loyalty to God cannot be purchased through comfort or broken through deprivation. So, when exactly is the mark applied? Revelation does not give us a specific calendar date for the introduction of the mark. It does, however, give us a clear narrative order. The mark of the beast does not appear before the beast system exists. It does not appear before the false prophet's signs. It does not appear before the campaign of deception, nor before the image of the beast is constructed. It does not appear before worship of the image becomes compulsory. The mark belongs to the mature phase of the beast system. This means that there's a sequence. The beast rises to power. The false prophet performs signs. The population becomes deceived. The image is established, worship is demanded, and then the mark is imposed. Economic participation is restricted. We also know that the mark is already fully operational before the bowl judgments begin. The first bowl falls specifically upon the people who have the mark and worship the image. Revelation 19 looks back upon the false prophet as the one who used signs to deceive those who received the mark. Revelation 20 then remembers the faithful who were killed because they refused the beast, the mark, and the image. The mark, therefore, belongs to the final beast crisis, after the worship system has been publicly identifiable and before Christ destroys the beast and the false prophet. This is another reason contemporary technologies should not be prematurely identified as the mark. A technology might eventually supply useful infrastructure for the system, but unless the beast has been revealed, the image has been established, and worship is being demanded, and economic authorization is conditioned upon that allegiance, well, the complete revelation system isn't present. It's not the mark of the beast. So, what does the mark of the beast look like? Revelation gives the functional requirements that we talked about, but it leaves the exact mechanism open. Several possibilities could be considered. A literal physical mark. The first possibility is a physical brand, a tattoo, inscription, or emblem placed on the hand or forehead. This fits the ordinary meaning of the Greek word of charagma, as something that is impressed, engraved, or inscribed. It would also be immediately recognizable. A merchant can simply look at the mark that you have on your hand before completing the transaction. Such a system would require very little advanced infrastructure and could be enforced almost everywhere. A tattoo, or something like it, would require very little technology. The limitation is that a permanent physical mark could record only initial enrollment. By itself, it would not easily measure continued loyalty or revoke economic access if a person later stopped participating. Another way would be a verifiable credential. It's some sort of authorization credential connected to a person's identity. This could theoretically be physical or digital. A person might complete the required worship act and then receive authorization to participate in the economy. The credential could be checked during the transaction and revoked if the person later failed to comply. In a modern setting, such credential might be verified through an identification system, a payment network, biometric confirmation, or a person's device. But Revelation does not predict smartphones, applications, QR codes, or any particular technology. Those are only two examples of how the function could be implemented. In my opinion, again, this is speculation, a hybrid system seems more plausible. A physical mark combined with a revocable authorization system makes the most sense at this time. The physical mark would publicly identify the person as belonging to the beast. The authorization system would determine whether that person currently remained in good standing. This would allow the regime to combine a permanent public identification with ongoing behavioral control. A person might bear the physical mark, but still lose authorization for failing to attend a required ceremony, publicly questioning the beast, assisting dissenters, or violating some other loyalty requirement. This hybrid system would make the mark visible while making economic participation continuously conditional. Again, this is just a possible implementation. Revelation does not tell us the way that the system must operate, but it demonstrates how the text requirements could be fulfilled without reducing the mark to either a tattoo alone or invisible software. The Mark and Babylon's Economy. Revelation 18 helps us understand why economic participation carries a moral significance. Babylon is presented as an enormous commercial system involving kings, merchants, luxury goods, international trade, ships, exploitation, and human lives. The economy is not portrayed as morally neutral. It is saturated with idolatry, excess, domination, and bloodshed. The mark therefore does more than punish religious dissenters. It enrolls people into an economic order that Revelation condemns. Receiving the mark means accepting the beast's authority, worshiping within his system, and participating in the commercial world built around that allegiance. Refusing the mark is therefore more than private religious disagreement. It is a refusal to become complicit in the idolatrous political economy. The believer refuses to say, I will worship whatever allows me to be comfortable. I will perform ceremony as long as I can keep my job. I will outwardly submit while claiming inward disagreement. Revelation presents that as compromise and the decisive test. The mark is where inward deception becomes outward allegiance. It is where worship becomes administration, and it is where administration becomes economic permission. In conclusion, we began with 4 questions. What is the mark? The mark of the beast is an externally verifiable authorization of allegiance tied to the beast's name and number and recognized as evidence of worship compliance. How is it used? It is used to control buying and selling, transforming access to ordinary economic life into a reward for allegiance. Who receives the mark? It is received by those who comply with the beast's worship system, whether enthusiastically, fearfully, or under economic pressure. When is it applied? It appears during the mature beast system, after the false prophets, signs, and deceptions, and after the image has been established, and after worship becomes compulsory. It's already operating before the bowl judgments and remains central to the final persecution of the saints. Revelation does not require us to decide whether the mark is a tattoo, a brand, a certificate, a biometric credential, digital authorization, or any of those systems. It requires us to recognize what the mark does. The beast claims worship. The image makes the worship public. The mark records compliance. The economy enforces allegiance, and the entire system turns worship into a permission structure governing ordinary life. That's why the mark of the beast is not just a technology question. It's a worship question. The final crisis is not about whether people will use the wrong economic tool. It's about whether they will trade truth for permission, whether they will exchange worship for security, whether they will surrender allegiance in order to buy bread, and whether, when ordinary life becomes conditional upon worshiping the beast, they will remain faithful to God or not.